Welcome to EMDR Playground, where the science of EMDR meets the creative wisdom of play. Well, hey there, I'm Jackie Flynn, an EMDRIA approved consultant, a trainer, and a play therapist. Here we explore how EMDR integrates with sand tray, art, movement, and the natural world in ways that open the door to transformation. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the EMDR Playground podcast. I'm really excited about the conversation today with Haruna now. She's someone that I met at the Florida Mental Health Counselors Association years ago, and from the minute that I met her, I knew she was someone amazing. And at the time of this recording, that's been years ago, so we've had lots of opportunities to have conversations and chats. We even went on an EMDR Advanced Skills cruise together and explored how she uses sound in EMDR therapy and beyond. Not only for clients, but also in her own wellness journey and healing. So I'm excited to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for being on here, Haruna.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
For those that don't know you, I'm wondering if you could just share a bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Sure. Yeah, I work in the Space Coast of Florida at a group practice in Melbourne, and I specialize in working with a lot of neurospicy folks. I work with a lot of LGBTQ clients. I work primarily with older adolescents and adults right now. Occasionally I'll see some children and seniors, just depending on what the needs might be. But I'm really big on integrating that bridge between Eastern and Western modalities. And so sound is like that perfect caveat to kind of being able to straddle both of those worlds. So I really enjoy that. Yeah, I do a lot in the community. I do sound baths in my community. So as we, talk about more sound today, it's really things that I love to bring in, like you said, lots of different levels and places in my life. So
Yeah, I know I'm trying to get on your schedule for my own session. Seems amazing. And I've had the honor of actually like being one of the people in your sound baths, which is so cool. And I want to say that it was an experience that when I went there, I was thinking, oh, this is going to feel really relaxing. But it was deeper than that. It wasn't just relaxing. I felt insightful. I felt balanced. And I just felt, I guess, for lack of a different word, alive afterwards. It felt like it opened things up in a
yeah, I
good
love
way.
that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah, it's even when I'm, on the host side of it, when you're giving that energy out, you're actually replenishing your energy as well. So it's not like a depletion of energy, right? And so it's that energetic exchange that can really, put you in a good place too.
Yeah, which I know as a licensed mental health counselor, that is one of our main intentions is helping someone have that emotional equilibrium, help them to be able to feel regulated. And that, I guess that's the word that's coming to mind is regulation. How do you use sound in your EMDR work?
So when it comes to using sound in EMDR, when I first approached it, it was really about taking a look at each of the different phases and figuring out, okay, where would be the best places to incorporate different types of sound while maintaining the fidelity of the protocol, right? And so, one of the biggest places that I use sound is definitely kind of phase one into phase two when we're talking about the resourcing, right? Especially like I mentioned, working with a lot of neurospicy folks, sometimes we have challenges with that interoception, or we have challenges with that, the awareness of the brain body connection and things like that. And so when we use sound, the sound actually allows us to kind of transcend the limitations that language sometimes has. It's its own language. And so it allows us to, you know, allow someone to experience things in the body with that sound and vibration in a way that perhaps they've not been able to describe in the past, or they weren't even aware that that was something that was happening. And so as it relates to EMDR, by allowing people to have that increased interoceptive awareness and have that um, shift in their different states, right? Allowing that decrease in the sympathetic activation and kind of having different ways to experience cues of safety, it really allows people to kind of transition into the next several phases in a really good place. And so that allows us to kind of step in and out and experience some of that titration and seeing what somebody can and cannot tolerate, perhaps in different ways. You know, they might have some sensory sensitivities, they may have some aversions to sound for different reasons. And so starting out in those phases with that exploration of what sound can look like in a session allows me to know, okay, what might this person's tolerance level look like if we're incorporating that into the process. And so as we're moving through the phases, you know, it allows us to deepen, like I said, the somatic awareness and that activation within that individual from that safe space, from that recognition that, you know, we're in a place that they have the rapport, they have the trust, they have the ability to navigate some very hard things from a place of being able to connect with their body in a way that perhaps they've not experienced before.
Wow. When you say that, I think about that's one of the hallmarks of trauma is that disconnection from the body. So to be able to reconnect through sound and to be able to have, you mentioned interoception, that awareness of what's actually happening inside, that could give access to sometimes maybe some stuff they're not aware of, which, I mean, that could be both something that's welcome and unwelcome, I could imagine. I know when we're talking about sound, I'd love to give folks an idea of what you use. I know you have a drum. You know, the drum is like, I'm a fan of the drum. Like one of my talks, you did that to help regulate and give them experience of what that feels like in the body and the experience. And you just recently sent me a text of somebody standing inside of a sound bowl. Can you give us just maybe even a visual of what it looks like and what kind of instruments, if that's what you refer to them as?
Yeah, absolutely. I will put a caveat out there that once you open the store, there are so many things that you can go down and so many different instruments and sound tools and things like that that you're going to want to include in your repertoire. And so I will warn you there. It's not a cheap investment all the time, but it's definitely a rewarding one. And so, you know, drumming is definitely one of my main sources of sound that I utilize. I have a conveniently located drum right under my desk, actually. So this is just a drum that I use in the office that is able to withstand different temperatures. So being in Florida, you know, we have to consider sometimes it's more humid or, you know, we have different fluctuations in temperatures right now, but this particular drum, you know, allows us to tap into those implicit memory systems in a way that when an individual is, and typically when I use the sound, they're standing up in a space in my office that I have a little bit more room, so that I can kind of give myself and the client distance, but standing around them and drumming in a way that they can still feel the vibration. So this right here is, they're actually sound panels in my office. So it's a little world map that I have, but those are actual sound panels to help with the absorption of the sound and be mindful of my office mates as well. But
I didn't even think about that.
yeah, some other instruments that I use and that I'm trained in, I'm planning to incorporate more of the tuning forks, because there's different frequencies that there's research out there that align with different parts of the body, that align with different memory systems, things like that. And so those can be utilized in this space. I do have crystal sound bowls. I have not utilized those in the EMDR space in particular yet, but I do plan to see if there is a way to incorporate that as well. I sometimes use rattles. So I am trained in indigenous Quero shamanic lineage based out of Peru. And so some of those more indigenous instruments or sounds or tools that can kind of elicit different memories in that sense, I do use as well. Talking an expansion there, you know, I have tongue drums, I have rain sticks. So there's different types of sounds that you can play with that can allow people to tap into different types of, like you said, that nervous system regulation, right? And so we can intentionally kind of expand what that window of tolerance can look like when someone's experiencing different types of sounds. But we do have to do it in a way that's more predictable for the individual, that is transparent with the individual, that you're getting that informed consent from that person to understand what some of the risks and benefits are of kind of incorporating some of these practices into this space.
Okay.
So,
So what I'm
yeah.
hearing you say is you're not just kind of just using it willy-nilly and being like, I'm trying to, just do something that the client will enjoy. It's used with clinical intentionality. When I hear you say rhythm, my mind goes right to Bruce Perry's work of neurosequential model, and just really kind of looking at how important rhythm is to the system. And gosh, there's so much that you can get into. And you mentioned that you're trained. What are the requirements around that? Whether it's like ethical requirements, legal requirements, or like what do people need to know when it comes to integrating this into EMDR therapy in a safe and ethical way?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely something that I continue to educate myself on to figure out, okay, what am I missing? What don't I know? For myself, I actually went through advanced training for sound and vibrational techniques through an actual school to receive a certification for myself. Now, it's not necessarily required, so to speak. But for myself and the way that I like to practice, I felt that I wanted to have that additional layer of training and understanding and be in a space where I could actually practice and rehearse in a contained space before I brought that to clients. And so there are different schools out there, there are different trainings out there. Again, it's going back to, I didn't want to incorporate anything else with EMDR until I felt confident of being operating in the fidelity of understanding what are we actually going through in all the different 8 phases, right? And so once I was able to actually conceptualize a bit more what we're actually looking for, what's actually happening, what's going on with the brain and the body, then I could understand better how to pair some of these modalities together. And a lot of what I teach with individuals when I am in this space is, okay, how are we navigating this from a place of recognizing what's happening in our own bodies as well?
Yeah.
Right. So when you mentioned Bruce Perry's work and some of these other, big names in the industry, we talk about the concepts of like entrainment,
Yeah.
right? When you're talking about the rhythm and allowing someone to experience the synchronization of their internal rhythms with some of those external rhythms,
Yeah.
right? And so feeling it even for myself is a big way that I've been able to understand, I can't assume that my experience is everybody's experience necessarily, but I at least was able to receive, the healing for myself in a way that I could at least see what capabilities are out there outside of the research as well. And so I'm very much a person that likes to read the research and see what that looks like and have those experiences. But I also am someone that has experienced experiences that, you can't tangibly explain.
Yeah.
And so having that open-mindedness for myself, I'm able to kind of weave in and out of these spaces that allow us to integrate these different modalities, and we're talking about sound right now, into a space ethically. I know you mentioned legally. I'm not aware at this moment of any legal requirements, so to speak. I would just say, be familiar with your code of ethics, be familiar with your scope of practice, be familiar with what is required of you by your state and licensure boards and things like that, to know what is appropriate to bring into the sessions and not. And there's actually a lot more room in some of those regulations than people realize.
I love that. And it's going to vary so much from state to
Mm,
state. What's required of one state may be different or around the world.
yeah.
One thing that's really coming to mind that you're mentioning is the co-regulation aspect of it. I hadn't considered that, like, they're not the only one that is experiencing the sound. And it's cool. I know you and I have had like several conversations on intergenerational trauma and how things aren't always known cognitively, but the body knows them. So that made me think of like when you said that it's not tangible, but it's still in there, whether you can, know what words go with it or not. So does sound access some of that stored trauma? And like, is that something that you would use in a target, or what's the logistics of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of different ways that we store trauma, and I'd say a good majority of people that I interact with and clients that come to me have at least a base understanding that there is trauma that's stored in different parts of the body or the brain or experiences and things like that. When it comes to sound, it allows us to access parts of some of these generational wounds or things that we've carried that have imprinted into our DNA, and kind of going into epigenetics a little bit, things that we've don't even realize that we're carrying, right? Like you said. And so I am trained in some of the more of those indigenous practices that allow us to understand how we can tap into some of that stuff that it wasn't necessarily meant for us to carry. And, I'm excited that that scientific research is catching up to show us that we are carrying 14 generations of that DNA and that imprinting in our bodies, right? And that we're impacted by the most recent 3 to 4 generations. And so, in the shamanic lineage that I'm more familiar with, when we're experiencing a healing in ourselves, the school of thought is that we're healing 7 generations back and 7 generations forward as well,
Oof.
right? Because we're adjusting the patterns of how some of those genetic markers are able to react in the system, and you're kind of flipping on and off things in the actual DNA, patterns and imprints and genetics and things like that. We're not adjusting the baseline coding that exists, but the different markers and things that interact within our bodies. And so it's pretty fascinating what can happen with these things.
Oh, that's amazing. And the thought of being able to, I mean, I love the thought of healing what we're carrying that may not be ours to carry, but the thought of impacting future generations, that's meaningful. And you mentioned a few times like the importance of like fidelity and
Mhm.
EMDR, like really working with fidelity. For those listening, the what that means if you're not like trained in EMDR yet, it's like working as it was originally designed based on the adaptive information processing model. We have 8 phases: history taking, preparation, assessment, desensitization, installation, body scan, and reevaluation. So you keep that right at the that framework in your EMDR. You're just integrating the sound through that.
Yeah, and as you're mentioning that fidelity piece too, what sound does is it's accessing those right brain neural networks, right? When we're using the bilateral stimulation, when we're using the dual attention stimulus, like that's where we're wanting the client to stay within. And so the sound actually does work with those parts of the brain as well. And so it aligns very well into the model.
That's so cool. And you're doing it with intentionality. And I
Hmm.
know at the time of this recording, you're a consultant in training, and we're almost out of time. So I want to make sure people know where to go to learn more from you, or to just kind of maybe even run some ideas by you, or whatever they may need. Do you do consultations?
I do. I'm actually launching my first big cohort group as of in January of 2026. So there'll be a Calendly link included if anyone's interested in that. And then I will be giving access to my email and cell phone number as well. So if anyone wants any one-to-one consultation, I do that as well. And those hours can count towards certification. Sometimes it's a one-off question that people just have a specific case on, and they're trying to wonder how to integrate this. And a lot of the conversations I have with therapists, there's a lot of people out there that are either doing some of this or are wanting to do some of this. And so, I love meeting people that we can kind of empower each other with the work that we're doing and apply the language that's necessary to allow us to understand that, we are working within a space that we're supposed to be working in, and we can do it, like you said, intentionally, and really support lots of people in a culturally respective way, in taking in a lot of different considerations for individuals.
Wow, wow, incredible, Incredible. My mind is like racing with different possibilities of how it could look in phase 1 and phase 2, phase 6, phase 7, or,
Hmm.
all the phases really. Sounds like it could really weave in and out of all of them. I know at the time of this recording, you and I are preparing for a presentation at the Florida Mental Health Counseling Association that is on rhythm. We're going to regulate people at the end of the conference. Well, that's the plan anyway.
Yeah. We'll definitely teach them how it can happen now,
Yeah.
and they'll actually be able to have an experiential experience with figuring out, with the understanding of the neurobiology, how that rhythm can actually exist in that space and what that looks like and what that feels like and being actually part of that experience.
Oh, it's so cool. Thank you, Haruna. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate your time today and your wisdom.
Thank you.